So yes, it's our Heritage Ponds project. I'm based in the Kent Downs, as you can tell by this slide. We're looking at all the dew ponds and the sole ponds across the Kent Downs. So a dew pond is, as you probably know, is a chalk pond that's probably been lined with clay at some point, probably by sheep that have been penned in overnight. Sole pond, S-O-L-E, is a Kentish term for a pond that is also in the Downs, but is a clay cap with chalk underneath, of which we actually have quite a few. So let me continue. Hang on one second. Brilliant. So a little introduction to our project. So we wanted to map all of the pre-1900 dew and sole ponds across the Kent Downs, which is no mean feat really, because the Kent Downs has got around about 145 parishes. It stretches from west in Westerham all the way down to Dover, so it's like the spine of Kent, if you like. We utilise something called the Kent LiDAR portal, which we're already utilising with a different project. We had a new layer put on there so we could utilise LiDAR and first edition and second edition OS maps, as well as a modern map and an aerial view as well. And all the data that we collected on the LiDAR portal was sent to Kent County Council's Heritage Environment Record database. And we recruited 55 volunteers that helped us with the mapping. And I also ran a couple of online workshops as well. So, oh, bear with me, I've just lost my, there we go. So this is just a little screenshot to give you an idea of what the LiDAR portal looked like. As it says there, we managed to map, and we are still mapping, 1,730 so far. That's a lot, I know. This is just a screenshot of what it looked like at the start of the project. Now you can imagine all those pink and blue dots, there's many more across the Kent Downs. And you can see the green line there is the outline of the Kent Downs. I had to chop off Dover, I hope they don't mind, couldn't fit it in. So what we were asking our volunteers to do was to fill out the pond details section on the left. There were drop-down menus asking them about the site type if they knew, preservation from what they could see on the maps, and then also they could click on the archaeological monuments, the HER, little black pin there, and then they could flick between the different maps, which is really helpful, and they could use a little slider to sort of drag it in and drag it out so they can see if that pond still exists today or not, if it's a ghost pond or not, for example. Yeah, and then I was going to show you exactly what a field record looked like. So just a quick example, here we have Knoll Park in obviously National Trust. The blue outlines are all polygons, so they're all ponds that have been mapped and drawn around. And then the field record that is produced on the right-hand side of the screen there. So that's pretty much what that list, the drop-down list we asked the volunteers to record for us, that's what it generates. As well as geology, which is very important, and a grid reference so we can find the pond if we want to go and site visit. So after we managed to map around 300 ponds, we thought we'd better hurry up and shortlist them for ground truthing or site visits. So this map here shows you with the green pins all of the ponds that we initially shortlisted. And we went for areas with less water in the landscape, which is probably more so East Kent than West Kent, former farmsteads, of which there are many across the Kent Downs, sites with public access, so public parks, places like that. The dark green areas is just a funding pot that we still know exists today, but that was early on, so we wanted to see what ponds are in those areas. And then the CMPs, which is the Countryside Management Partnerships across Kent, and FWAG, who you might be familiar with, Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group, we gave them around 20 to 30 sites each to go and ground truth for us. They couldn't necessarily do all of them because sometimes the landowner wouldn't respond or they couldn't get access. So, but they still managed to ground truth a fair number. So I thought you'd like to see a few example sites. So this is Winchcombe Down. This is a Natural England site. It's part of the Wye Downs National Nature Reserve. It is right up on the Downs actually, so it's beautiful views from the top here. Obviously has public access with footpaths. This is the second edition OS map. As you can see, the Victorians very kindly gave us some clues as to what's going on in the landscape with old chalk pits that are marked on there. And we looked at the two ponds, one marked in the middle next to Coombe Wood, and the one directly above, which is actually on the edge of Eggring Wood. We thought these actually were dew ponds, but we were wrong. These are actually sole ponds because there's a nice clay with flint's cap with chalk underneath. As you can see, they do hold water. That's just a month apart. So on the left-hand side, you can see the sort of nutrient enrichment that's been created there. Cattle are allowed to have access, unfortunately, to these ponds, and they have damaged the clay liner. On the right, you can see it does hold water and when there's heavy rain. In fact, this pond has common water crowfoot growing. I saw this recently, it still has it growing, and also water starwort grows when there's water. And then the other pond, to give you an idea, looks very similar size, and again dry, and then when heavy rain, a bit of water. But this one has got slightly steeper sides, and we know these are Victorian ponds because of the historical research that we've done. So this site has me completely perplexed, and actually has the archaeologists perplexed. So if you have any ideas as to what on earth was going on here, I'd be really happy to have a conversation with you. So this is Chine Farm in Knockholt. Knockholt's in northwest Kent. It's the highest parish in the Kent Downs. As you can see on this map here, hopefully you can see there's Knockholt House in the middle there with a sort of triangular section of land. That was built by a Victorian silk merchant from London. He then bought the farm next door, Chine Farm, or now known as Chine Farm, created a silk mill, but I think it was short-lived. He then created these very strange circular ponds, as you can see, that have the dots on them all around. They are not small. They're anything from 500 meters squared up to 1,000 meters squared. And they're all derelict, unfortunately, but they're very interesting. They were marked as ornamental ponds, but I'm not convinced they are just ornamental ponds. So here's some photos of what the site looks like today. We kindly had the tenant farmer giving you an idea of scale. So that's the largest pond he's standing in. That is completely circular. It has a feed, a channel into it as well. These are very ornate. So they are brick. We think they're concrete lined. They've got brick and fancy decorative brick as well. The one on the left, the photo there on the left, I hope you can see, we think is a reservoir. It's massive. It's about 12 foot high, the walls, possibly higher than that, you're standing looking down. The photo in the middle is the pond. There are two circular ponds that match along a field boundary. They are split in half. The top level is higher than the bottom level, and the other pond, a mirror image, is the other way around. Very strange. And the middle bit has got a circular brick structure, as you can see there, with the holes in it. So we don't know if that was to aerate the water or something. We have no idea. So we are commissioning a historic building survey for this site because we'd love to know what these ponds were, how they functioned, how they worked. As this is chalk, there is no springs here. There are no mill ponds, things like that. So a head scratcher. I put Knoll Park in because it's National Trust, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. This is the second edition OS map. The first edition had no ponds drawn on it whatsoever. Then suddenly, come 1890s, we have suddenly loads of ponds, which is very interesting. So these have all been mapped by our volunteers. My hunch is that these are all former extractive pits because we have a mixture of geology. We have sandstone, mudstone, limestone. When you're walking around Knoll Park, if you ignore the actual Tudor manor house, I'm talking about the walls and the other little cottages. They're all made of sandstone. So that's why I think they might have used these as extractive pits to create those walls. There was also a nursery, I think, marked on, as in a plant nursery, marked on the original map. So these are all the different ponds. They're all different across the parkland. The one on the left there is on the golf course, and I always wonder how many golfers think that's grass and wander in to fetch their ball. Then the one on the right there is that colour because it's so full of silt, nutrient enrichment, and the centre one there is actually within the parkland itself, just off one of the footpaths. So here's a very quick list of the ponds that we shortlisted. We tried to spread the love across the Kent Downs, so we really have gone from west to east. So you'll see there's like Kamer Park in Mepham, which is a public site. They have a ghost pond of about 200 meters squared that we're hoping to restore. Cobham Wood is a National Trust site. They manage some of that woodland that's near the Darnley Mausoleum. You'll see a picture in a minute. We have already restored that pond. Hucking has a community orchard pond, Ball Place is open to the public, also for children's groups as well. And I would probably say majority of these are ghost ponds, in other words, ones that have been backfilled over time. And then we've got to all the way to the east, furthest east, I believe, would be probably Stelling-Menis Swingfield. And these are all old farmsteads which have ponds that have disappeared over time as well. So yeah, what did we do next? So we have all this historical knowledge. We asked Canterbury Archaeological Trust and a couple of other archaeological groups to do some research for us, a rapid survey. We then asked them to actually go to the sites. We split the sites up between them and to go and do silt sampling for us. Here's an example of one of the sites here. This is Greatdales Farm, which is Elmstead, near Stelling-Menis. We were inspired to do the silt sampling by a project that's still ongoing via KCC's archaeologist at Shorn Country Park. Brandon Manor doesn't exist anymore, but their medieval fish ponds, 3 of them do still exist, and they did radiocarbon dating and paleo-environmental analysis of the silt there. Discovered it was, as it says, Mesolithic, Anglo-Saxon and medieval, which is amazing. So we were hoping that our ponds would also show up some very interesting findings. So we did commission silt sampling, if possible, at all of the ponds that we shortlisted. So apart from the silt sampling, we also commissioned 2 test pits. Canterbury Archaeological Trust helped us with that at 2 different sites. This is one of them. This is in parish of Acres, which is in East Kent. This is on MOD land. They have a lot of land with a lot of ponds on. Initially, it said the carbon C14 dating suggested Bronze Age, and we were like, blimey, that's fantastic. But when they actually did the 1 meter deep test pit, they discovered that it wasn't. We can only assume this was backfilled with a lot of soil and a little bit of Victorian brick and rubble. So I can only assume, maybe you can tell me otherwise, that perhaps the soil that they imported at some point had the Bronze Age silt in it, who knows. So this is a pond we were hoping, or we are hoping to restore now that we've done our test pit. That will be a future time. So here's some success stories. We have actually restored 5 ponds so far out of the 20 that we are hoping to restore. The one on the left is Hucking Community Orchard. We said pre-1900 ponds we wanted to focus on, but we slightly bent the rules here because it was only on the 3rd edition OS, so 1903, that this pond first appeared. It isn't exactly the same place. We've recreated it, if you like, in the same place, same size, same shape, and that's about 1.5 meters deep in the middle. It is natural, and you're very welcome to go and visit because it's open to the public to go and see. It is still holding water today, which is great. That was done in January this year. The photo on the right is Cobham Woods Pond. That was done in October last year. The National Trust initially tried to restore it themselves with a contractor in 2020. They did it naturally, and because it's a mixture of geology, it only held water for 1 year. They then approached us as we had funding, and we funded a bentonite liner, which is probably the most natural liner you can get at the moment, which is clay sandwiched between geotextile. As you can see, it held water very fast. So I'm actually going tomorrow with the volunteers, National Trust volunteers, to do some pond dipping, which would be really exciting. To see what's there. I hear that it is full of plant life and full of hopefully water life too, which we'll discover tomorrow. Then we have ghost ponds. We have a lot of ghost ponds, which are backfill ponds across the downs. I'm sure you, as your archaeologist, you'll be very familiar with this, doing some cross trenches. So we initially worked with the Norfolk Ponds project, which you might have heard of as well. We did some training with them last summer. And they have a lot of ghost ponds in Norfolk in clay. They're very lucky. So they taught us how to do this. So as you can see, we brought in a digger for one of our sites also in Elmstead, and we did a cross section. And you can see the very dark black areas of silt. And the photo on the left shows you the curve actually of the pond going down. And then the photo on the right is that lovely dark area we think is actually the bottom of the pond. This is I'd like to say a dew pond, but I think it's actually more of a soul pond because it's clay with flints with a mixture of silt, sand, and gravel. So it's a whole mixture of stuff. We did this naturally. Unfortunately, this pond isn't holding water as of yet, but the landowner is very laid back and just wants to see what happens over time. But it's likely we probably will put a bentonite liner in the future. So a little summary of what we're up to. So last year we were very busy. As I said, we were successful with funding to pay for the archaeologists to do the silt sampling and send off appropriate samples for C14 and for paleo environmental. That was with farming and protected landscapes. It came back saying that all our ponds are post-medieval, which is a bit of a shame because we were really thought that some of them, especially at Winchcombe Dam, were a lot older. Apart from this pond, which you see in this photo, which is Cossington Field Farm, it's between Boxley and Bluebell Hill in Kent. It came back as being medieval, which is amazing. It's probably my least favourite site. As you can see, it's quite desolate and quite depressing, massive open plan arable field. But we have got plans to potentially put in some new ponds here and some scrapes and inoculate those with the silt from that pond, as this site's being handed over to highways, Kent Highways actually. We have been doing wildlife baseline surveys of all our sites, and we are continuing that this year. And I also trained local volunteers, so National Trust volunteers, as well as ones at Ball Place and Hucking. So they've got their own kit now. There's also Acres Environment Group as well, have got their own wildlife survey kit, and they're going around surveying around the ponds. And as mentioned, 5 ponds now we've restored under DEFRA's capital grant. So kind of as almost a final, really, to give you ideas of what we're doing. So we've done 2 years of this project so far, another 3 still to go. My colleague Sally is currently applying to the Heritage Lottery Fund for further works to these ponds, so either to actually restore them or for further research. So like the Chine Farm one, the head scratcher one, if you like, in Knockout, that one we would like to commission a historic building survey to find out what the ponds were, how they functioned, and what they were used for. So that's where I said further archaeology as well. Wildlife monitoring, continuing that, people engagement as well. We're engaging with historical societies and other local groups. We are creating a reserve list of other ponds to restore. We're very lucky in the Kent Downs as there's quite a lot of funding coming our way with different funding pots at the moment. So we are thinking, wow, let's make the most of it. So we definitely have got a reserve list that we're starting. Interestingly, there's very little written down about how these dew ponds were originally created. We only know from word of mouth from farmers that they used to puddle the clay, create a sort of a shallow circular dip in the landscape, and then they would import some clay or bring clay elsewhere on site. And then, as I said, fence sheep in overnight, and then they would use their hooves to basically puddle the clay. So we're hoping to maybe trial that with one of these ponds and do that ourselves, or maybe we'll just pen some children overnight or something from a local school. They'll probably enjoy that. Who knows? And access interpretation work, we'd like to put some interpretation panels up where appropriate on perhaps the Kent Downs, some of the footpaths across the Kent Downs, and at public sites. And again, the other main thing about this is there are other schemes within Kent, not actually just within Kent, a Natural England scheme that's to restore and create ponds for great Christian newts, so specific species. And there isn't enough funding for that scheme to commission archaeological watching briefs, for example. So they would just go in with a digger, say with this pond you see in the picture, dig it out, spread the silt out thinly across the local farmer's field, job done, fantastic pond for wildlife. We'd like to produce best practice guidance specific to the Kent Downs for these really important historic dew and sole ponds, that isn't always the best way to go about things. And actually, historically, we should be doing archaeological watching briefs or test pits or silt sampling, because it's all part of the history, otherwise it's lost forever. And then we're hoping to do, at the end of our project, the end of the 5 years, a Heritage Ponds exhibition with what would be lovely would be to get some sound bites from local people about remembering these ponds, especially as there's lots of historical farmsteads, and maybe even a festival of water at Shoreham Country Park where Randall Manor used to be. So yes, that just leads me really to say thank you very much for listening. And this is my contact email address, heritageponds@kentdowns.org.uk. If you have any further questions, or if you'd like to come to me with some ideas and suggestions for some of these ponds that we have come across. So I'll stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
That's good. That's a relief. Hi, thanks for the invite to chat to you this lunchtime. As you said, I'm talking about the last year's wildfire on Fylingdales Moor, which seems to have taken over my life over the period from September through till now. And I expect, and likewise for my team, that it's going to continue to do so for the foreseeable future. Just in case you're not familiar with Northfield Moors, Fylingdales is a really quite large area of moorland on the east side of Northfield Moors, a little way south of Whitby and a little way north of Scarborough. It's quite remote parts of it, and it's surrounded by a couple of very large coniferous, or edged by a couple of very large coniferous plantations, Langdale Forest, which is on the south side, and Sneaton Forest, which is on the west side. So the fire likely started in June of 2025, and it was actually contained in the north part of Langdale Forest. The fire service couldn't extinguish the fire because it was within the peat underneath one of the planted areas. So there were fire breaks cut around it, and it was left and monitored. Unfortunately, that fire broke out to become a moorland fire during August. We had exceptionally dry summer, as I'm sure you'll all remember last year, and during August and September we had a combination of very low humidity and strong southerly winds, and so that small contained fire broke out and became what at that point was the largest moorland fire we'd seen in Northfield Moors, around 5 kilometres square, and that contained within that orange boundary you can see. And then over the August bank holiday weekend, that fire broke out again, having been contained along a track, and then over the preceding 2 days spread north and essentially burnt through all of the available moorland. The fire service were really badly hampered in how they could tackle it, partly because Fylingdales Moor is a former military range, and there were numerous examples of ordnance exploding during the fire. So their project was really around containing the fire as much as possible, and that involved cutting large numbers of fire breaks. So the little pecked lines you can see are the rough locations of what we think to be in excess of 50 kilometres of fire break. So what was the moorland like before? So it was not necessarily typical for Northfield Moors, but like a lot of the moorlands, it was highly designated. So it's SSSI and specially protected area and special area of conservation. So it had really important plant communities and a number of rare species. It could be characterised by a mixture of wet and dry heath. So generally fairly shallow peat, but quite extensive amounts of peat. It had been historically managed as a shooting moor, but the last 50 years there'd been very little shooting on Fylingdales Moor, and much of the grazing had been a kind of a combination of rotational burning and sheep grazing. So it's also common land. There's four graziers, 2 of which had very significant amounts of livestock on the moor. So the owner of the main area that was burnt is Strickland Estate, but obviously the two are forested areas, and a little bit of the moorland was managed by Forestry England. In terms of the historic landscape, the main part of Fylingdales Moor had kind of a mixed level of understanding really before the fire. Some specific sites have been looked at in some detail, and because there'd been a previous wildfire in 2003 on an adjacent area of moorland, there's some understanding of the prehistoric landscape, certainly at least nearby. But I suppose the other really big factor is the military use of Fylingdales Moor. It was acquired by the MOD in 1940 and used throughout World War II and as late as the early 1960s for military training. And that initially involved tank training, but also encompassed artillery and ground troops. And during the war, the moor was used for as a decoy, as a series of decoy sites, both a starfish fire decoy and electric light decoys. So it was deliberately designed to distract Luftwaffe bombs from legitimate targets. And beyond that, there'd also been some a little bit of recent work to start to characterize what had been recognized as an extensive routeway network. That's a wider project that really sort of covers part of the eastern side of North York Moors, but it noted that there were some significant groups of holloways within the area that was subsequently burnt. So I just wanted to show you a kind of one of the few oblique aerials we have, which is looking over part of the southeastern area of Fylingdales Moor, and it gives you a sense of what it looked like in the weeks after the fire. So what you can see there, it is a quite mixed picture of the impact of the burn. So the areas that are black still have a surviving root mat, although in many cases the seedbed is completely lost. And the areas that are white, those are where the peat soils have entirely burned away. So there's literally nothing left to grow in. And that's kind of one of the really serious implications that we're dealing with. So to summarize that, we've got this 20 square kilometre area of moorland where there's no vegetation. In some areas we've got exposed soils or burnt root mats, but also in many areas there is no soil left. We've also got these fire breaks, which are quite a significant problem. They were cut as part of the emergency response while the fire was burning, with no recourse to anything except containing the fire. So some of those have clipped significant bits of archaeology. And beyond that, we've got kind of a future and emerging issues because both the fire breaks and the fire have altered the hydrology of the moor. So we're starting to get runoff in places we didn't used to. And we've also got quite severe wind erosion across the moor. Sort of more specifically in the archaeological sense, there's 15 scheduled monuments that are now been added to the Heritage at Risk Register because of impacts of the fire. Probably for me, the more significant mind-blowing issue is that we've got this huge landscape now that is readable, and there's vast numbers of previously unseen archaeological features. And that, I suppose, is also complicated because the response needs to be put together quickly because of the emerging erosion problems and because it is also part of the livelihood of the farmers who are managing them all. there's a real pressure and need to stabilise and revegetate them all rapidly. We've also got challenges in terms of the time and budget we've got to do that. We're in the fortunate position that we've had an offer of funding from DEFRA to support restoration of the moor, but that comes with a fairly tight time turnaround. So the project is forcing us to streamline how we respond, and for me, in an archaeological sense, that means we're having to take different approaches than we normally would. So a little bit about what we've done over recent months. One of the serious issues that hampered how we could respond to the fire initially was because of the ordnance. During the fire, between 25 and 30 explosions happened, some of which produced pressure waves that could be felt a kilometre away. So the MOD were extremely reluctant to let people wander on the fire, and rights of way were closed, and access was crow access was suspended for a period of time. But by December, we were able to start walking over the site properly. So essentially, we triaged the moor and looked on the archaeological side at where there were previously unseen remains. And we looked at the known scheduled sites and what the impacts were on them. And we were supported by Historic England in that process, because they flew an initial aerial survey of the northern part of the fire site. So our initial process has been really around identifying the scale of the problem, what's burnt, what conservation response is required, and to inform how we think about the archaeological response for my part. The Park Authority has also been involved in the Local Resilience Forum, which is essentially the liaison between all of the different stakeholders around the disaster. So we're very well embedded in the environment part of that, and have been playing a quite key role in that. In initial terms, we've been supported by Historic England, who provided us with a capacity building grant, and we've used that in two ways. One is around buying equipment and software. So we've purchased a drone, which is enabling us to record the landscape in quite a lot of detail. And the other thing it did was that it enabled two members of staff to be seconded into roles, and that they could give their full attention to it over the winter. That's meant we've been able to do quite a bit of work over the last few weeks. We're still early on in the response work we're doing, but we've covered around 30% of the burn area with high resolution imagery, and we've started a small number of projects at the sites we consider to be most at risk, including a prehistoric cross ridge dike. Historic England have also been able to undertake some more aerial survey work, and we hope to get the results of that in the next few weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some example images. We have literally thousands of images from the fire site now, but this is just to give you a sense of what some of the impacts are like on the ground. So this is one of the fire breaks on Sneaton High Moor. And as you can see, there's a quite large Bronze Age barrow in the background that's been clipped by it. So one of our initial projects is looking at two sites like this. This is kind of a close-up of sort of it could be pretty much anywhere on Fylingdales Moor, but it shows a little military feature. So there are hundreds of little cut foxhole trenches, machine gun emplacement type features, often with a little cut trench and associated spoil heap, things like that. As I say, literally hundreds and hundreds of those. Often they come with nearby small finds. This is one of the few bits of ordnance that could actually be picked up. It's a solid shot, so effectively like a cannonball. But ordnance has remained an issue across the moor. And this is showing an example image from the Historic England aerial survey, which was flown in November. This shows one of the decoy sites I mentioned earlier. This was known about before the fire, and in fact is scheduled. But this is what is called a starfish or QF site. So it's a decoy that was designed to imitate fires and explosions, and essentially mimic a burning town or industrial complex. So the circular or circular-ish features you can see are essentially fire breaks designed to contain the infrastructure that burnt, designed to distract Luftwaffe bombing raids. The other things you can see in this are give you a sense of some of the routeway network, and I'll come on to that in a bit because we've got some really good images of those. Ed Dennison, who I think is on the call, did some survey work on a different kind of decoy elsewhere on Fylingdales Moor called a QL decoy, which is essentially designed to produce light leaks and again act as a distraction to Luftwaffe bombs. The fire seems to have revealed a previously unidentified light decoy towards the north of the burnt area. I don't know how well you can see the imagery here, but these little sort of W-shaped trenches all housed various bits of lighting with shades designed to produce those little light leaks. During the early part of the war, Fylingdales was also used for tanks, and so one of the things we've seen extensively is evidence of tank tracks, and in a couple of places we've seen these bollards, which are actually kind of part of the training infrastructure. So they reuse tank tracks that have been looped up into circles, and those are quite good evidence of that tank training activity. We also find numerous small finds across the fire site, but we have seen a couple of examples of prehistoric rock art. This one's really quite small, but just happened across it whilst walking one of the rights of way in the northern fire site. Of the 15 scheduled monuments at risk, the majority of them are prehistoric sites like this Bronze Age barrow. This is one of a pair of barrows called Thornkey House. It's been quite severely burnt, and there's no seed bed left on it, but there is, at least over some of the monument, a surviving root mat, so it's not one of the ones we're most concerned about. A different example of what was a previously unrecognized prehistoric cairn in the background is Lillicross, a very well-known Bronze Age barrow with a medieval cross on. But this small feature in the foreground has been really severely burned by the fire. It's not scheduled, but actually really potentially quite vulnerable. One of the features we would consider targeting for reinstatement work as a higher priority. There's also very significant cross-ridge dike on in the centre of Fylingdales Moor, and that parts of that monument have survived the fire quite well, but particularly where there's steeper slopes, the fire has burnt down them quite slowly. So there are some of the earthworks, as you can see, the paler areas on there have no root mat left, and because we subsequently had a very wet winter last winter, some of those earthworks have started to slump. They have quite high clay content. So this was one site where we did some emergency conservation work. Basically, we put a coir mat over the top of the worst affected areas, and that seems to be working quite successfully. And in fact, told by my colleague yesterday that there are things starting to grow out of that coir matting now. Okay, I'm going to just take you on and show you a couple of examples of the drone imagery we've been able to capture. We did have some 1 meter LiDAR data before this project started, but it struggled to penetrate through heather canopy. And so we're finding that the imagery we're generating of Fylingdales is producing a really detailed record, and we're picking up prehistoric and military and a whole range of monuments that we haven't seen before at all. So this is that probably prehistoric circular feature from the last image. I quite like it as an image because it also gives a sense of how severe the burn is in places. For most of that, there is no soil left at all. That's just ash. And you can also start, if you look closely, you can also see water channels starting to form through it as a consequence of last winter's rain. Let me get through. Oops. We are seeing very large numbers of features that we don't properly understand. A lot of them are quite small mounds with an adjacent pit, and they appear over really extensive areas of the southern fire site. We do have some theories about what they might be, but one of the projects we hope to do over the coming months is some archaeological evaluation of a small number of those to see if we can confirm them. Another really significant aspect of the fire site is that we have this really extensive transport network. So most of the traffic that comes south from the coast or Whitby now goes along the A171, or if it's going to Scarborough A170, both which are turnpike roads that were built in the 1760s, and prior to the 1760s, nearly all of the traffic that went on those roads went across Fylingdales Moor. So one of the first things we noticed were things like this cart track, and there are literally hundreds of these. I'm going to show you a couple of example images. So this is part of what is called the Robin Hood's Bay Road. So the fine lines you can see in there are cart tracks, but there are also earlier hollowways within that image. Perhaps find a different image. This is perhaps a better example. So you can see the cart tracks actually kind of in many cases don't go into the holloways, but use them as a way marker, if you like, or to mark the course they're taking. So that's a really interesting, a fascinating project because there's literally hundreds of miles of trackway and holloway. We've commissioned a project to try and use machine learning to to see if we can characterize those. We think there will be different widths of cart track, and from what we've seen so far at the fire site, there appear to be different types of holloway. So it's quite an experimental project, but we hope it will produce some really interesting new insights. I have to say also, I think what's really significant is I don't think this transport network with this kind of detail has been seen before. So it's one of the really important bits of future analysis that we hope to capitalize on. This is simply showing the transcription data from Historic England's aerial analysis. But the point I wanted to make with this slide was that nearly all of the polygon data that you can see there is that transport network. So literally many hundreds, potentially thousands of years of mobility represented in different kinds of routeway across the landscape. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. That it's a very been a really interesting project from so far from the learning. It's quite a challenging environment to try and pull together an ecological response in, partly because of the different competing pressures for reinstatement of the moor, and the need for it to return to agricultural management, and partly because of the uncertainty around funding. But so we're really being pushed into new territory, into how we respond to it in an ecological sense. But it is also I think the learning from it is going to be massive over the coming years. Anyway, I will leave it there, and not the cheeriest quote to finish on, but I suppose one of those key points is that this is going to be happening more widely and elsewhere. So for some of my colleagues at least to think about.